So I started this in a very ordinary way. I Googled something last Friday. I typed, why should I not chase meaning? Not because I was having a breakdown or anything, just curiosity, the usual background noise in my head on a Friday night. And Google gave me one of those very clean, confident answers that you're very familiar with. It said something like meaning comes from within. Stop chasing external validation. Build your own happiness. Focus on yourself. When you hold, the right things will come to you. And parts of it sounded reasonable, but something about it bothered me. The more I read it, the more it sounded Western, very individual focused. The kind of advice that assumes that you're the center of the story and everyone else is a sort of, side character, which immediately made me think this advice is not neutral. It's coming from a culture where putting yourself first is not just allowed, it's expected. That's not how most of us grew up. In places like India and honestly most of Asia, meaning is not something you build entirely on your own. It's tangled up with family, with obligations, and with stability, and with doing the things that you didn't exactly choose but still take responsibility for. So when someone tells you, don't chase meaning, just focus on yourself, the obvious question is, at what cost? That's when I started thinking about bitterness. Because the people I see today are not bitter because they failed. A lot of them are doing okay. They have jobs, they have amazing bosses, or they might have okay bosses. They're competent, they're not struggling to survive, and yet they're restless in a very specific way. So let me just describe someone as an example. Let's call him B. He has a decent job, not amazing, not terrible. His parents are not financially dependent on him. His boss is not a monster, just irritating, a bit dull maybe. By older standards, this would have been called a settled life. He's not unhappy, but he's not at ease either. And then again, he opens YouTube or Instagram or TikTok, and now his life starts getting narrated back to him. Someone energetic, someone very charismatic, and obviously with some sort of agenda, right? Tells him that spreadsheets are meaningless and that presentations are kind of stupid, and that he has bought into a life of corporate slavery and this is modern slavery, and that somewhere inside him there's a more authentic version of himself that he has not really listened to. And at first, this feels very validating. Then it starts to do something else. B begins to look back. He begins to look at his past. He begins to pick at certain memories. Did I not enjoy painting when I was 10 years old? Did a teacher not say that I was good at public speaking? Did I feel alive imagining quitting everything at that one point? None of this troubled him earlier. Now it starts to feel like evidence. But all these things begin to point to a life he somehow missed. And that's when the bitterness starts to creep in. Not because something was taken from him, but because something was suggested to him by somebody very charismatic on social media. No one actually blocked his path, no door was sort of shut on his face, no dream was crushed in front of him, but suddenly there's this idea now that he was supposed to be something else. And once that idea enters your head, it's very hard to sit with what you have. It's very hard to be comfortable with what you have. Your life stops being imperfect. I mean, we all know that it's imperfect. It actually starts to feel unfair. And when it starts to feel unfair, that's when you're cooked. What modern culture, and especially Western culture, does is turn ordinary experiences into unrealized destinies. So, what I mean by that is that you did not just like painting a little bit, you might have meant to be an artist. You didn't just tolerate a job, you sold out. And once you start seeing things this way, dissatisfaction becomes moralized. You're not just bored, you're actually betraying yourself. Older cultures were much less dramatic about this. They didn't promise that work would feel meaningful or that some desire that you've always had would find some outlet. They assumed boredom would be a part of life, that repetition was normal, and that not everything you liked would become a little life project. And strangely, people seem to survive just fine. We don't handle that very well anymore. So we've created another explanation. If you're restless, it's because you're not expressing yourself. If your job feels empty, it's because society forced you into it. If you're dissatisfied, it's because you were meant for more. And buried inside all of that is this quiet assumption: meaning should not cost you anything. But when you look at real lives, that does not seem true. Anything that genuinely matters means paying a price. For example, a career in art is going to ask you to let go of stability for some time. Independence might cost you belonging to something. And earlier moral systems were upfront about this. Now we sort of pretend as if the bill does not exist. So when people don't get the life that they imagined, they feel cheated, even though no one actually promised it to them in the first place. No wonder this bitterness is actually here. The guy in our story B, he won't quit his job. There's too much to lose. But now he can't fully accept his job or his boss. There's just too much resentment. So he drifts. He fantasizes about leaving. He feels contempt for the present. He feels oddly nostalgic for a version of himself that never had to deal with real constraints. And this is not rebellion, it is actually mental clutter. Modern culture is cluttering up your brain. And here's the uncomfortable part: a lot of the lives people feel robbed of were never strong enough to survive any real sacrifice. Not because the people were weak, but because the desire itself was not that deep. If B's desire was to get into that art career no matter what, he would have done it. He would not let anything stand in his way. Not security, not the opinions of others, etc. He would not wait for perfect conditions. But if the desire was just a fleeting one, then he gets trapped into this climate of discontent, this constant negotiation in his own head. The things that generally matter to people tend to be somewhat inconvenient, and that's why desires disappear the minute you start asking something more serious out of it. So maybe the problem is not that we are suppressing our true selves or anything. It's just that maybe we are not very good at telling which desires will stay and which desires will just go away. So we live in a culture that constantly amplifies our desires and blurs that line between we like something and I am meant for it. And then we quietly punish ourselves for not following through. Now, so when I think back to that Google answer, don't chase meaning, build it within yourself. I don't think it's wrong. I just think it's incomplete. For a lot of people, meaning is not something that you chase or manufacture. It's something you arrive at by being honest about what was real and what was suggested to you and what you're actually willing to pay for. Once you do that, life doesn't become amazing. It becomes a little quieter in your head, and sometimes that's enough.